All right, sir. So, sir, it's nice having you here. It's our pleasure having you. Thank you for the privilege.
My pleasure, David.
All right, sir. So we know you started CWG over 25 years ago now, over 26 years ago, as a matter of fact. And your first entrepreneurial journey. The question is, why did you take the leap? I mean, you had a comfortable job. Why did you take the leap?
Yeah, David, thanks very much. I did have a comfortable job. I was on a commission, which was usually multiples my salary, and life was on a roll. But having done that for about 4.5 years, you still get a feeling that there is a void, something is missing. And I think, David, it has to do with whether you are operating your passion zone or not. So sometimes we even do well professionally when we are not operating in our passion zone. If you remember that my first love was not sales. I read computer sciences. I had a 2-1 from Unilag, and I wanted desperately to be a systems analyst or programmer. And each time I went for an interview, I was told, why don't you try sales if you don't like it? They didn't even interview me for an analyst programmer. Perhaps they just saw the person and thought that fitted the profile of a salesperson. And I went in and I did fantastically well. But at the end of the day, you get a sense that something is missing if you are not in your passion zone. If you take a look at people like Nelson Mandela, his passion was to free his people. Obama was to make change. He was a senator. He was very successful. And Usain Bolt would like to run very fast and break world records. Achebe would like to write novels and put things in a human context. So to the same degree, you have Adichie. I felt that I was still searching. So I went to start CWG. At that time, it was Computer Warehouse Limited, later become CWG Plc. But the whole point was to have the breadth to be able to express myself with people. And looking at the back of that was also shared prosperity. How can we provide a platform that will create a means for people to be able to do their job better? At that time, it was technology.
Wow, the internet has gone bad. So we'll just wait for Mr. Austin to be back. I think he has some internet itch.
David, sorry, I think we got disconnected there.
Yes, I guess it was the network.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know where I stopped, but you asked me about why I left to set up CWG, and I think I was on a journey of discovery in terms of my passion. And even though I had not discovered it by starting CWG, I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew that I was on the right path to that journey of discovery of what I wanted to do. And CWG provided me the platform because this is something I controlled, and this is something that I could determine how it went.
Oh, thank you, sir. So, from your experience, I mean, so far, what qualities do you think an individual needs to possess for them to be fitting to take on the entrepreneurial role?
So I get asked this question a lot, David, and a lot of people ask me, entrepreneurs, is it nature or is it nurture? In other words, people born entrepreneurs or do they learn it? And my feeling is always that it's just not the right question. I think for me, the right question is who volunteers to be an entrepreneur? And if you put your hand up, then you are the right person. No matter the innate abilities that you have, your innate ability, if you don't put your hand up and you don't go and start, then you are not the right person. It's like going into the army. If you are combat knowledgeable, but you don't volunteer to go into the army, then you are not a soldier. And somebody may be less combat knowledgeable than you and he volunteers and he goes into the army. That is a soldier. Same with entrepreneur. The question is, once you've made, first, how do you make up your mind whether to go into that journey or not? And for me, you have to, in my view, take a very practical approach. I always advise people that ask me, should I leave my job and go and start? Do I have the qualification, or should I continue in my job? I will not make that decision for you, but I will give you the framework for making that decision. And my advice is simple. Draw a T table. A T table, on the left hand, you're going to put all the reasons why you should stay in your current job. On the right hand, you're going to put all the reasons why you want to go and start on an entrepreneurial journey. And you put all those factors in the respective columns of the table. And at the end of the day, you look at which side of the scales the balance tips towards. So if the balance tips towards staying in your job, in other words, you don't have a passion, you don't have the staying power, you don't have a unique idea that is going to bring any innovation, and you don't know which idle assets you are going to connect to pent-up demands like Uber or Airbnb or even Amazon, then of course the scales are tilting towards staying in your job, because at least you're doing something that is earning you a salary. If on the other hand, the scales are tilting more towards going to set up on your own, the second step will be to sit with your stakeholders, and that will include your wife, maybe some very close friends, and also someone who is not invested. That is not your wife nor your close friend, nor anybody who will benefit or not benefit from your decisions. I remember the story that someone told us when they came to the academy, that the parents were very much against his leaving his job at a top airline because they were getting free tickets, and they didn't understand why he wanted to go and start on an entrepreneurial journey. So that is an invested party. Yeah, those invested party views are important, but you need to also seek the view of someone not invested. He will not benefit or lose. And then you go through that tea table with them, and then it sort of validates whichever decision you take. Assuming you took the decision to become an entrepreneur, you also need to then follow a few steps. And those steps are that you can go fast alone, but you go far together. A tripod is a quite balanced stool to sit on. And that tripod will be to look for partners to come with you. Maybe if not in the very beginning, at least sometime in the too distant future of your entrepreneurial journey. Let's take some examples. If you take Steve Jobs, he had Steve Wozniak. If you take Bill Gates, he had his name escapes me, but Bill Gates had a partner, and you see that Obama and Vice President Joe Biden work very well. You always find that combination that brings the best in people. In business, typically you have the entrepreneur who is a hustler, and then you have someone who is good technically. Look at the situation in which we are now. Without technology, David, you can't continue to prosecute your business. And I think it's also good to find someone who understands finance and operations. So the three then make a team, or minimum two. And then the rest is left to how you execute that innovative idea that you have.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. So I know at some point you talked about if you see certain qualities, then it means you might be for the entrepreneurial journey. But if you don't see certain drive in you, you should remain at your job. Are you saying that not everyone is built to be an entrepreneur, or not everyone can be an entrepreneur?
I think you have to ask yourself that question and answer it objectively. Typically, entrepreneurs are visionaries. So entrepreneurs see before anybody else, see more than anybody else, and they see further than anybody else. So if you look at the founder of Zoom, he probably had scenarios that he had put together. I mean, he was working somewhere before, and he had in a similar environment in a company, and he pitched the idea of Zoom and they didn't buy it. And he went to start on his own. But I suspect that he had looked at a situation where should there be a case where we will not have face-to-face meetings, what we do? How do we then bring to the online environment something as close to face-to-face meetings as possible? And well, he saw that scenario and he planned for it. So when the pandemic hit, he had a playbook and he pressed play and he was flying. But imagine if he had not done the back end in the sense that, he started from less than 10 million and is now at 300 million. If at 30 million, the system fell over, he would have created a market that he would not benefit from. So entrepreneurs are the visionaries. They see that vision. But then you also need leaders, because leaders will take that entrepreneurial vision and bring it into where we are today and create a strategy to march us from where we are into the vision. And that strategy will be executed by managers. Managers are the people that do the how. How do we get from here to there? All three are required. So part of the entrepreneur's key attributes is people management. It's also how to find those people, how to empower them, how to be empathetic, be resolute, but also listen and be ready to make adjustments if there is a superior argument. But it's a lot of management of people, and people that are very intelligent, brilliant. They also have their idiosyncrasies, and you have to be very empathetic. Otherwise, you lose your partners.
Wow. Okay, sir. So I don't know if you've seen some of these arguments on social media a couple of times where the younger generation blame the older generation for this mess, the older generation with the younger generation you are not disciplined. And the point I want to draw from that is people often say that living in those years when people of your generation went to school and had to start businesses was easier than now. Maybe you should just give us a pictorial idea of how easy it was for you when you started CWG around 27 years ago.
So, David, your question is quite packed. On the one hand, we're looking at generational, who shoulders the blame between the generations. On the other hand, we are looking at how easy it was to go and start an entrepreneurial journey. Let's take them one by one. So let's look at the generational shouldering of where we are. My children who are now millennials, well, they are not, but they like to refer to them as millennials. They are younger than millennials. One of them is 20, going to be 20, and one of them is going to be 15. They always bring up this argument whenever we sit down at a dinner table. And I'll find myself defending our generation, and sometimes I'm quite unobjective because I'm invested. But let me answer it very objectively. My question to them is, fine, so what do you think is the problem we have today in our country, Nigeria? And you see, they'll come with a long plethora of things, and this happened and that didn't happen. I say, very good. So then what do you think is the solution? You people should do this, should have done this and this and that and that. Long list. I say, very good. So what is your role in this solution? Then it becomes a short list because they haven't thought about that. The truth is that you cannot go back and write the beginning of the book, but you can start from now to write a better ending. And that's what I will charge our millennials to do. Given all that is there, blaming people in the First Republic, people in the military governments that came on all that, it's not going to go back and change anything. Question is, starting from where we are, what should be done, but not just what should be done by others. What's your role in what should be done? Because if we all play our part in our role in what should be done, then we will do the right thing and we'll get out of this situation. It's not a hopeless situation. Anytime we decide to start, potential is so huge, it will take a very short time to get out of it. How long did it take for Lee Kuan Yew to make Singapore? Dubai, all of us go to. I mean, if I started going to Dubai quite early, and the change in transformation has been phenomenal in a short period of time. How long did China take to lift 300 million people out of poverty? The question is, you just have to put a stake in the sand and start. The best time to plant a tree maybe was 20 years ago, but the second best is now. My worry is that even the now we have not decided to determine fashion start, not to talk of starting. We have not decided to start, not to talk of starting. We're still doing the analysis of who to blame. And the longer we spend on who to blame, the longer we delay, hey guys, let's start now. If you talk about opportunities between then and now, when I was starting CWG, it was quite challenging. I mean, I remember that my first LPO financing was from a bank called Commercial Bank Credit Lyonnais. I mean, I've been everywhere. Nobody wanted to listen. I started a company. The money I saved, the ones I took from friends, I rented a house, bought a car. It was probably paid 1 or 2 salaries. And I got this purchase order that I needed to finance, needed to bring in a machinery, computers, and I didn't have the money. Nobody was ready to listen to me for the simple reason that I didn't have immovable collateral, land, house. Someone who's just worked for 4.5 years and starting on his own, where is he going to get a house or a land? So I went to Credit Land, forget the name of the manager, the branch manager, but I really cherished that gentleman. And he made an argument to his boss then at the head office called Mr. Will. And they made a concession for me. What do I have movable? Okay, my car, my video, my sound system. What else did I put there? Not that it meant anything, but just to fulfill requirements. And then they gave me the loan, the LPO financing. I brought in the goods, supplied and paid them. And then we grew together, myself and that bank. And I will advise many banks to do that. The business is not the buildings and the structures, but the business is the founder, the promoter. Look for a founder that you believe in, trustworthy, and work with him towards building that his Agile Enterprise into a conglomerate. So CWG started as an Agile Enterprise. For some reason, I don't like the term startup or SME. They look beggarly. I prefer the term Agile Enterprise. Why? Because you are agile. It's a speedboat. It's not like a ship. There's advantages of being agile. You know, a speedboat can do gymnastics on the water. A ship needs at least a mile to turn a degree. You know, so each one has its own advantage. An agile enterprise, they usually have a certain innovative idea. It could be some elements of technology leadership, which means they found a certain software that can do something, or a code, or something patentable. It could also be that they're taking advantage of technology and add value to it to create excellent service. So we did that at CWG. We had a partner that had a banking application called Finacle Banking Application. That partner was Infosys in India. But the success of Finacle in Nigeria is not the banking application. It's a plethora of services that CWG was able to bring, including local customization, local support. We invested heavily to make our people as good as the Indians. That was a success story. So that's service excellence. It could also be customer intimacy, in which case there is a narrow vertical segment of the customer base that you know so much about it. You know, so I mean, if you take, for instance, this particular narrow area of consuming entertainment on cable TV, I think DSTV has proven that they understand that narrow segment very well. They may not be doing e-commerce, but in that narrow segment, it's difficult to disrupt them. Maybe they will be disrupted one day, because sometimes success is the enemy of success. When you're so successful, you begin to lord it on the people, your customers. You don't care. Unless you are empathetic to the customer and you behave as if you are not the only one, assuming there was competition. How will you behave? That's exactly how it should be. So it was difficult, David. And I mean, we grew with the bank, and many other banks came in and so on. But if you look at your time, David, there are so many opportunities for attracting funds. There's so much information on the internet. We didn't have that. I remember that we used to send things by fax machines. You people don't even know what a fax machine is. You had, I know, it had a distinctive sound. Ta, ta, na, 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 na. You know, we used to go to the post office to post a letter, and then you wait for 2 weeks for the letter to reach. Could be an invoice, could be a purchase order. So I think things are easier. There's nothing you want to research now that you cannot do a very good job on the internet. We didn't have that. You know, we had to rely on Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, encyclopedias, and then there's so many um, impact funds. You know, crowdfunding, VCs coming in. We didn't also have that. But having said all that, we were very determined because on that corridor, when we started at Kadelabu Street in Sulere, on that corridor, there were about 15 other entrepreneurs that were running IT businesses. There was another corridor on Okere, and there was another corridor on Eric Moore. But people were carrying on with it. We didn't complain that we didn't have what it takes. So I don't think that we should focus on what is not there. The whole point about being resourceful is getting to where you're going to or getting what you want with what you have. Having said that, let me conclude by saying that there are three things that play in this situation. And one of them is what I call uncommon advantage. Uncommon advantage is basically the era of your birth, the circumstances of your birth, things that are not in your control. You are just an advantageous person because you find yourself in a family that can send you to school, probably overseas. So you have that uncommon advantage. When Jeff Bezos started his bookshop called Amazon Online, the uncommon advantage he had was the internet was just booming. It was growing at 2,000%. So he rode the wave. Zoom has an uncommon advantage of the pandemic. Had it not been for the pandemic, Zoom won't see this kind of growth. So uncommon advantage is one. The second one is unmerited favor, which is when God smiles on you, your guardian angel are doing overtime, and all the stars align for you. As the Igbos say, the person who the gods have helped to crack his palm kernel should not go about boasting about his prowess. Then, of course, the other one, the last one is natural ability, which is basically your willpower, learning as much as you can about what you want to do. Your willpower, which is learning as much as you want to do. Your willpower, which is carrying on even when everybody thinks this is the time to stop. You believe that at the end of the tunnel, shortly there will be light. And your weight power, your ability to have patience for those seeds that you've planted to grow into big fruits. I see a lot of young people, they start a company, 2 years later, they're going for Series A, Series B, Series C funding. And at the end of the day, they funded everything and then they own 2% of the business. We shouldn't be in a hurry to sell our seed. I think you should plant your seed, let it grow, and then you have bountiful fruit you can sell out of your fruit. That is when you raise all those funds. And they raise the funds and they believe that's the end of the business. And everybody applauds. XYZ company raises $20 million. Does he need it at that time? Would he have waited and gotten more for it? And I think those are the issues around the whole journey of entrepreneurship from my perspective.
Wow. So you've answered like two questions I had ahead, one about Finacle and the other about funding. So I will just go around the questions in a different way since you've answered a good part of them. But this is very deep, sir. So let's quickly talk about Finacle. I know Finacle is a banking software for people who don't know about it. But by the time you introduced Finacle into the ecosystem, it wasn't that there wasn't any other software the banks were using. There were softwares being used, being provided by bigger players, international companies. How were you able to enter the space, and how were you able to dominate some sort because at the point Finacle was reporting like 15% of banking transactions in Nigeria. So first, how were you able to penetrate that space? And the second is how were you able to keep it tough? So lessons for young entrepreneurs.
I think the first thing is to even recognize what will work. So yes, Finacle was not the first one. If I can recount, we had Bankmaster from Ireland. I think we had Globus, or at that time it was it was called Globus, but it's now Terminus. Terminus was a software that was initially used by Citibank that was customized, and the technical people left to start a company. So those were two major ones. We had FlexCube as well. Finacle was actually the last to start to come in. We had Capiti from America. But the most important thing that we were looking at is how do we get a banking application that has been operating in an environment similar to ours, an environment that all the T's are not crossed and all the I's are not dotted. And they have the technical horsepower to write a good application that will stand the test of time. At that time, India had started becoming the call center of the world. And they were also they're writing good code for the Americans. So they have a time difference where when the Americans slept, they pass on their systems to the Indians would do all the patches, write all the software and so on. So the Indians became very good at software. So the brain power for software was there. And as well, their environment was not very different from ours. It was an emerging market environment. Not everything worked properly. So anything that will work in that environment will work very well here too, given that we have common challenges. So having put those two things in there, the question is who and what. We were doing some research about companies in India, and we found that Infosys had not just been a successful company, but a company of deep governance, and they built a track record of trust, the kind of values we shared. So we approached Infosys, and it wasn't so you approach us, here it is. They came to Nigeria to do sort of a check to determine who they will partner with. We were not on the top of their list. I remember our office in Adelabu in Sulere. They had gone to, I won't mention names, but they had gone to supposedly more older companies that were more mature, and they didn't, I don't think they got the kind of reception that they thought they deserved. And they were on their way to the airport, and they just thought they would stop over at Adelabu. And because we had gone looking for it, we knew exactly what we were looking for. We rolled out the red carpet. At that time, we had written code for a telephone banking system and a PC banking. You just took balances of the standing server, and then you can know the last three checks, and so very basic. And we were able to convince them that we will bring more to the table by way of becoming as good as they will allow us to become, so that they won't have to be flying back and forth and putting so much pressure on their own support team. And I think that resonated with them, and we laid the groundwork for achieving that. That precisely was the success. The success was because we understood the system as well as they did. We could customize it to what the customer wanted today, but we also were in a position to make quick changes in case the regulatory requirements change or additional reports were needed. On the other side, the other banking software had to then write to their company overseas, and then they will be passing papers back and forth about identifying the need and then documenting it, change management. By the time they would have done all that, we'd already put in the requirements, and the software was running the new systems or the new requirements. And of course, because we had so many banks using it, we had an academy here that were training Finacle personnel in the dozens. Therefore, the banks didn't struggle to find people. So a culmination of all this meant that when a bank was going to buy a software, the first choice would be Finacle, and most times it will go with Finacle. That's why we came from virtually nowhere to the point where at some point in time, and probably even now, 75% of banking transactions in Nigeria are done on Finacle. UBA is on Finacle, First Bank is on Finacle, SCMB, and a lot of the new banks, Globus Bank, forgot the other one, they're all on Finacle. And not, like I said, just because the code of Finacle is good, but because of all these other things that add much more value than just a code. After all, there's not very much difference between one software and the other. They're all doing loans, they're doing treasury and trade finance and so on. But it's those plethora around it. And that's why we made the breakthrough with Finacle.
Wow. Wow. I'm hearing some of the things I've not heard before, like the value added around it. Quite a lot of deep stuff. So
I forgot the second question. What was the second question again?
I wanted us to talk about funding.
Funding.
You raised funds eventually. I know you talked about being patient and not eating your seed. So eventually you raised funds, and I mean, after fundraising, we've seen a lot of the younger entrepreneurs raise much more than that for ideas that have not lived as long as CWG. So, what learnings do you want to share with us from your engagement with fundraising?
I think the issue about fundraising is that it should not be an end in itself. It should be a means to an end. And I would say you should tick as many of the boxes as possible, because the people that are giving you money, they are not philanthropists. They are not running not-for-profit businesses. They are actually astute businessmen. They are not happy with the normal rate of return on their funds. And that's why they go into something as risky as venture capital or private equity. Because in that instance, if they give you, say, $1 million today, in 5 years, they want $3 million back. No stories. They don't want to hear that exchange rates went up or it went down or there was COVID or no COVID. They give you $1 million today. 5 years down the line, they want $3 million back. In addition to that, you'll be paying them what we call the coupon. So whether you declare dividend or not, they will get an amount every year, usually equivalent to the bank interest rate. And the day you declare dividend that is more than that bank interest rate, you still give them out of that dividend, the higher value. So these people are not teddy bears that you cuddle. They're dying with a very long spoon. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying it the way it is, having been on that road myself. Now, the preparation. My advice is that try to do the things that will initially knock you down in value. So have a board, have your board minutes, because each of these things, they tick. And where those things are not there, they drop the valuation significantly. Merely not having a board or not maintaining board minutes will drop significant valuation for you. And then the deep governance, board committees, committee for governance, committee for risk, committee for remuneration, just have those board committees, whatever you need to. And the best thing that can help you is to do something like an ISO certification, because then you begin to see what you need and take it. I also advise you to take what we call a term sheet. A term sheet is the document they'll give you to sign to agree to the loan. Study that term sheet and look at the things that typically they will ask for. I'll point you out to one of the very dangerous ones, which we call the golden share. So no matter the amount that they invest in your business, even if they own 10% or 20%, they will structure the term sheet such that you cannot take any decision at the board if they do not agree. Essentially, every decision is passed through them. So if they don't agree, then it will not fly. And if they agree to fly, So that's like a golden share because that share supersedes all shares. So if you have 75% of the business, but someone who has 25% determines what the business will do. And I don't blame them because what have you brought to the table? They brought their money and the belief in you. So they also need to protect themselves. But this is where it gets tricky. And it's linked to funding, or it's the crux of it. David, let's say that I took $1 million in 2014 from a bank. And let's do this arithmetic very carefully. At that time, the rate was 191 naira to $1. So let's even say 200. So that $1 million I took from the bank, that was 200 million naira. At 20% interest rate, we're in 2019 now. So this is 5 years hence from 2014. Sorry, we're in 2020. This is 6 years hence. So 6 years at 20%, that's 120%. That 120% of that $1 million is $1.2 million. $1.2 million at 200 naira per dollar is 240 million naira. In other words, that 1 million naira that I took, which was then 200 million, what I'm going to return is another 240 million. Get that straight. I'm going to return 240 million plus the 2 million that I borrowed. So I'm going to return 440 million naira. Let's keep that figure to one side. Now let's do the arithmetic as if you took that $1 million from a venture capitalist firm. In 5 years, they won times 3. So that means that by 2019, they won $3 million, right? And 2020, whatever it is. So let's even say 2020, they won $3 million. Now, $3 million today at the rate of 440, can you calculate it? If you fetch your calculator,
At the rate of 420,
per dollar.
That's about 1 point something billion.
Yes. So the one that went to the local bank is returning an amount of money equal to 440 million naira, right? Now, you that took your money from the VC, you are going to return 1 point something billion.
About 1.2 something, yeah. 1.2.
So the money you are returning to your VC is 3 times the money that I'm returning to the bank, and we borrow the same amount. Do you see my point?
Yes.
So if your business hasn't reached the point of inflection, I don't think that the VC money for you. Maybe you should just do debt, borrow naira and pay the interest rate. What do I mean by a point of inflection? So there are some businesses where in building the business, you assimilate a lot of the cost. So any additional customers you add on is pure profit, contribution margin. And those businesses add on customers in geometric fashion, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's a payment system or so on. Those are the good candidates for a VC loan because they've already put down the platform. They've already incurred the cost. And if with additional money, they can quickly scale up, then that is the business that you want to take a VC for. Because as you're scaling, almost all the money of the additional scale is profit. Then you can afford to pay 3 times the cost of somebody who borrowed locally. Apart from that, you get a bit more leeway because they are not asking, if you borrow money from a bank, you have to renew every year. It's a short-term loan, unless you get a long-term loan, which is not very common. Whereas the VC will give you the loan for 5 years. So in 5 years, you can do what you want, but be ready to have his 3 times money. And so you see that debt is cheaper, much cheaper. 1/3 the price of equity. Equity from VC is 3 times the price of debt. The question you have to ask me is that, what if you tell them that, okay, so I cannot pay, do what you want to do? They'll do it very well. Because when they came in, let's say $1 million that they put in was for 30% of the company, which means that the company was worth
3 million.
3 million. Now you owe them 3 million at the end of 2019. That means they own the whole company now. If you can't pay them, you probably end up with less than 5-10%. Because whatever you can't pay me, I'll take it as equity. That's also in the term sheet. I hope this really breaks it down to all these young people rushing back and forth and celebrating Series A and Series B. Those VCs and Ps are not teddy bears. They are not to be cuddled. You need to have a long spoon if you want to go to dinner with them.
Wow, this is very deep. Okay, thank you, sir. So let's talk about the people. I know for a very long time in the Nigerian tech.
I'm sorry, I didn't conclude. You asked me about the money we raised. Yes, so it's not CWG raised $10 million in 2009. I think it was one of the first to raise in technology to raise money from a PE firm. At that time, before then was the frenzy on the stock market. So a lot of companies went and listed on the stock market. And it's an easier path because that equity has no condition. All shares are equal, so nobody has a golden share. The path we took of a private placement and raising money from the PE firm was as dangerous as the one that we described. But at that time, David, in 2009, which was roughly about 10 years ago, we had seen that cloud computing was the way to go. We called our strategy CWG 2.0, taking the business more towards cloud computing and towards a shared economy with bills and pay, with SMEP and so on. And we knew that this growth was going to be geometric, and therefore we could cover the loan. As I speak to you, we listed our company in 2013. And at the point that you list the company, the golden share disappears. All shares become equal. And the investor is still in the business. Business is doing very well. So this was one of the good stories. But I know some other stories where the owners of the companies have ended up ceding over 70% to the PE or the VC because they couldn't make the 3 times the amount in 5 years, which is the stipulated term sheet that they signed. Sorry, David.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. The added information is very, very much needed. Okay, so I'm sure our readers will find this very, very useful. I want us to talk about people. I know at some point, for a very long time in the tech ecosystem, CWG was like the go-to, like the talent hub for the ecosystem. When foreign companies are coming into Nigeria, they go to CWG to shop for good hands. How were you able to build that pool of talented people, and especially with a system where a lot of people have ambitions? How were you able to keep the ones within your system?
So this question has 2 parts to the answer. The first part is how do you attract, and the second part is how do you keep?
Yes.
So let's talk about the attraction. When we started CWG, we didn't have the muscle, the financial. It was just me and a group of friends that put in money. And so we really started with interns. People are doing IT, or people are doing youth corps. That was our staff. So right early in the days of CWG, young people were given a lot of responsibility. As we didn't look at anybody as IT or youth corps. We also accepted that mistakes were part of learning. So we encourage people to explore, to be creative, and when they make mistakes, we didn't punish them. But just make sure that you don't make the same mistake twice. And also make sure that whatever we can learn from that mistake, you've documented. So it became like an intrinsic research company. People were deeply passionate to go to work because they always were looking forward to the new things they would do, the new ideas they would bring. We listen to everybody. That's how we're able to attract typically young people. And we attracted them not for what they could get. We attracted them for why they were joining. The why of it is the belief in our shared vision. At that time, our vision was quite simple. Our vision was to shoulder the technology burden of the customer so that the customer can focus on his core business. And it was all about trust, service excellence, and intimacy. That trust element was extremely important. We call it candor. Because it's not every time that things go the way you want them to go. Sometimes things fall over, you didn't meet the commitment you've made. And that is where you hear a lot of bankers say, oh, manage the customer, which means just be telling him lies. We were open enough to say, sorry, we dropped the ball here. And then once we admit, we make restitution, and then we go into correction mode, and then we make sure that it will not happen again. So customers knew where they stood with us. They knew the score. And they also know that we'll always put in the extra mile, whatever was required. And the people saw this and they wanted to be a part of it. You know, people didn't join Obama's campaign of yes, we can, because of how much we could pay them. But they joined because, yes, they can make a change. You know, and they wanted to make a change. People joined CWG because they believe in our why of shouldering the technology burden of the customer. If you look at ALA, the reason we set up ALA is to enhance shared prosperity. We believe that if we impact companies to grow geometrically, they will optimize the jobs they will create, and we'll all have shared prosperity. So people join us because of that value of shared prosperity, not what they can get. People join you for what they can get. The day they can get a better what, they will leave. But we also made sure that we created an academy. We call it CWG Academy. Which was one of the ideas I had about institutionalizing this young people empowerment and getting them to be ready to take up responsibility. So in the academy, we had a hardware session, software and networking session. And people would come in, they probably didn't even read computer sciences. That was not important because we hired for character and we trained for competence. So what will happen?
Sorry, sir.
We bring in people and we put them through the academy 3 months. At the end, we take the best 10%, we absorb them, we give some to our customers. Pardon me.
Sorry.
And sometimes, so we have the academy, and because people knew that there were young people ready to take up any challenge, people were not encouraged to threaten that we're going to leave. You know, typically people will come and say, oh, here is a letter, I've just got a job, either up my salary. They weren't doing that because for every key person we had, there were 10 people from the academy that was ready to carry on. And so that was very good. So those were a combination of attraction and retention strategy. The retention was mainly because people believe in what you believe in. They see your vision. They see their role in it. They see that it's an overarching vision beyond just making money. You're solving humanity issues. And they also see the role of every other person. Everybody feels that they're achieving something, they're contributing something, they're doing something meaningful. And then there was also the academy. So those were the things that we use in our human resources strategy. And that is why a lot of the OEMs that were our partners came in to raid us of our staff. Usually they were polite enough to say, Austin, you know, we need to build this business together. Can we have Kunle? You know, Kunle will add value to us. And so we'll have that discussion and we'll ask Kunle whether he'll be happy. And then we'll have that action, you know. But in other places, they just go and raid the place. People that have been trained with the sweat and resources of the core company. The OEM, which is much richer, will just come and raid the staff and leave his partner company limping. I don't think that's wise. I think there should be a collaboration about that. But then again,
okay, thank you very much, sir. So let's talk about the tech ecosystem in Nigeria now. The few next questions we're going to have will be about that. So, first, I know last week or 2 weeks ago, there are a couple of celebrations about certain platforms in Nigeria that have spent 10 years. And there was a bit of debate about where innovation, where we can, where, which at what point we peg and say this is where the tech ecosystem in Nigeria began to grow, or when the tech ecosystem in Nigeria became innovative. Some people were saying, oh, it was when CC up came in. Some people said it was when we began to have e-commerce like Jumia and Konga and all that. So the what became obvious is that there is a gap between your generation and the new generation of people that think technology is all about coding and software development. The first question is why do you think we have this mentoring gap in our system, that mentorship gap, and what can we do to mend that bridge such that the old generation will be able to have this relationship with the new generation, and the new generation won't have like a perception of the industry that is circle around them. They will understand that there are founding fathers and there are a couple of things they need to do with the experience of the whole. That's the question.
So, David, this is a phenomenon which I call scrambling for the crumbs. What do I mean by scrambling for the crumbs? People invented the garbage, touring, even before there was Microsoft and Bill Gates and so on. Touring machine, garbage system, the ENIAC, you know, they haven't laid claim that they were the ones that started this or that. People here that have not even manufactured one single chip or written one single operating system are scrambling for the crumbs. Oh, I was the first to do that. This happened, and we're talking about 10 years. I think it's the wrong focus. It's the wrong focus. Many of these things are individual choices. If you are a young tech entrepreneur and you see value in what you can learn from those that have gone before you, avoid the mistakes they made, even speak to them about some of the things you want to do and take their inputs. I think that's wise. If you're a young tech entrepreneur and you believe that it all started from you and the people that have gone that path before have nothing to contribute and you can make it, that's also fine. But there's no general this or general that. I think at the end of the day, what we do at the Ausso Leadership Academy, believing that those that have trailed the path before have something to share, we bring them in as champions. And these veteran champions who have made deep contribution, be in tech, be it in advertising, be it in manufacturing, they come and they tell you how they did it. They are not giving you a blueprint. They are just saying, this is how we did it. These are the pitfalls we avoided. These are the accelerators. And here is where we have arrived at. Maybe we could have arrived at a point much farther in front if we had done this and that. So you, as a delegate, have the opportunity to ask them questions directly and use whatever you've learned from them to better yourself. If you feel that they don't have anything to add to you, so let's not invite champions, let's just go into the models and the framework and start running, and then we'll lose a lot. I think these intergenerational unhealthy discussions are precisely that. They are very unhealthy, they are very distracting, and they are always the same. You know, the thing about a rat race is that even if you win, you're still a rat. So let's stop all this rat race and focus on how we can work together for the betterment of the ecosystem.
Thank you very much, sir. So a couple of things needs to be done for our ecosystem to get better. I feel that we are not contributing as much as we ought to the GDP of Nigeria, for instance. I would just love to gain your worth of experience. What are one, two, three things that you think stakeholders in this system need to take as urgent action to change the trajectory of the tech ecosystem in Nigeria?
Yes, David. I think the first thing I'll talk about is a beaten path, and that is power, electric power. I'm not talking about generators. I'm talking about sustainable power. It could be solar or renewable, or it could be from the grid. But that power is basic and fundamental to the ecosystem. Without that power, it's so difficult to even start. So the first thing, David, is let's get the power right. I don't mind if we get it right and it costs us more, because it's costing us more to burn diesel anyway. But let's get it right. And it beats me why countries that we started with, be it Ethiopia, Ghana, they've all managed to sort out their power. Recently, South Africa has so many power outages over the last 2 or 3 years. They sorted it out. Nigeria is one that has thrown the most money and gotten the least output. Having talked about power, I think the next thing we need to look at is broadband. Look at it. My kids are able to do continuous schooling online because I have broadband at home. Their teachers have broadband, the school has broadband, and they are uninterruptedly learning. But this is just maybe 5% of the children that go to school in Nigeria. A large percentage don't even have power. They don't even have mere internet connection, not to talk about broadband. Where do their teachers live? The school, what do you see there that resembles internet or broadband or computer?
It's 1 o'clock.
They are totally disenfranchised. They are not learning. And they've not been learning since March. And it's not likely that they're going to be opening the school till September the next semester. They've lost a year. But our children are learning and they are continuing to learn. It's not sufficient that only the cream of the society will have this, will I say, privilege. Let's democratize that privilege. And it comes from, in my view, the whole notion of governments trying to make money from right of way. That is taxing your seed. There's so much broadband lying at our shores. The problem is the last mile. But to take it into the last mile, you need to dig through the right of way. And governments have put so much burden on the investors that they are not even digging for the last mile anymore because they are not able to come up with the money for the right of way. Studies by the GSM Association show that if you tax the right of way, you are just taxing 12% of the value. On the other hand, if there is broadband and therefore there is e-commerce, there is education, and there is businesses that thrive as a result, that's 78% of the value that you can tax. And we don't get it. We still always want to eat our seed instead of waiting to harvest the fruit. These two things are important. And they link to the third one. So power and broadband, but skills. Skills comes from how educated, how much you've invested in educating your people. Not just teaching them book, but how you have trained them to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. In other words, train them on how to fish rather than giving them fish. The way we still teach our children is to learn by rote. We give them handouts. We tell them these are 20 questions, 10 of them will come in the exam, and then here are the answers. And they're able to write down the answers for you word for word in the first class. But take that first class into industry and give him a set of systems to start working. It's totally confused because there's nothing that you can pour from memory onto the paper. We're not looking for people that can pour things from memory onto the paper. That's what we have the internet for. You can always Google it. We're looking for people that can go on a journey of discovery, a discovery of creation, innovation, agility, pace, resourcefulness, how to find a way to cross a bridge. Now, I'll summarize this with a story. There are two army captains. One of them was told by his general, capture that bridge at Onitsha. We need that bridge to capture by 14:00 hours. He went, and the bridge was not there. The bridge had been blown. He came back and told the general, there's no bridge. The bridge is blown. The second lieutenant was told by his general, capture that bridge by 14:00 hours, because we need to move troops to quell rebel activity, and if we don't, we're going to lose this battle. He went there and the bridge had been blown, but because he knows the importance of being able to cross to quell rebel activity, he scrounged and saw another alternative bridge not too far, captured that one, came back and told the general, the bridge at Onitsha has been blown, but I found an alternative. If we leave early enough, we can make it. So there's a difference. We need to teach our children why, not just tell them what. So we say, what is photosynthesis? When I went to school, it's a process whereby plants make their food from sunshine. That's what we should ask them. We should ask them, describe photosynthesis. Let them use their own words, imagine the process, and then give you their own version of what it is. So skills, broadband, and power, but they are all interrelated.
Wow. It's quite a lot. Thank you very much, sir. So I know you are into mentoring now. I'll just love you to share with us a couple of exciting things you're working on for the future for your followers that are interested in what Mr. Okere is doing right now.
Okay, so if I get your question correctly, because the broadband is fluctuating a bit, you want me to share what I see as the future for Nigeria, or what I want to do in the future?
Yeah, what you're working on.
What I'm working on.
Yeah, for the future, your future exciting plans.
So David, my new shift, my new focus is about shared prosperity. I believe that with shared prosperity, we will have a common culture of humanity. Humanity is our common heritage, and we should all have access to those things that make us human. So if I look at the inequalities, they make me sad. Be they race inequality, or gender inequality, or even inequality in digital assets, have and have nots. And I look at the fact that there is enough for all of us and our needs, but not enough for our greed. If I juxtapose that against the greed of the elite and how we take so much more than we even need, generations need, and it's rendered useless because we deposit them in Swiss banks, and then by the time we bow out, it's stuck in there. A good case in point, when the General Abacha died, and up to today, they are repatriating his money. Each one they repatriate, we have to go argue, fight. Do we even know what is left? Can you imagine if this money was used for development of Nigeria, whether in education or hospital? Today, a lot of so-called VIPs that are used to going to get medical treatment overseas have to now rely on the hospitals they didn't build. We're all falling down like flies and dying because of COVID. What makes us feel that the places where we go for medical service, that they need to put in medical facilities for us to go and enjoy? Why don't we put down the medical facilities that we feel we deserve here, instead of putting our monies in Swiss banks? Same with education. So part of what we set up the Ausso Leadership Academy to do is not just share prosperity from the private company's perspective, but even from the government. We had a government past people that have been there. One of the most prominent ones is Honorable Madam Idola, who has joined hands with the Ausso Leadership Academy to empower the youth that are disenfranchised, they have not, to get education. David, I know you are part of this initiative as an ALA alumni, looking at cheap ways to provide them radio sets that they can continue to do their learning on formally, so that they are not totally left behind. Yes, it's not as versatile as using a computer, but at least you have something. And to raise my plan, oasis of sanity amongst us, both in government and public and private, working together to bridge the divide of between the have and the have not, or the enabled and the non-enabled, so that we can have a common humanity that we can all aspire to, where we all have something. Even if people have much more, everybody has something that will keep him going. Not that some people don't have anything at all and a few people have everything. So that's very unworldly. It's still forming in my head, but it's not something I'm ready to give up on. And this I will continue to do until I'm no longer able to do it.
Wow. Thank you very much, sir. That was supposed to be the last question, but I'll just take this opportunity to ask just one more. And you mentioned something about racism and rape inequality. I know quite a lot about racism, especially in foreign climes, because that is where the black and the white have to. Here we'll talk about that. But I don't want us to dwell. I just want us to look at what is peculiar to us. So, according to the Broadband report for Q1 2020, of all the funds that startups in sub-Saharan Africa raised, only 3.2% that total was raised by startups that are led by women. In Q1 2019, they raised 5.7%, but now in Q1 2020, they raised just 3.2%. I was also reading about another report that was talking about the startups that were listed in the top 100 in Africa, and just 3 were led by women. So, women and men, the inequality is still there, especially in our space. What do you suggest we should do to balance that inequality in a way?
So, David, your question is in 2 parts, and I think the first thing is, how do we attract women into the space, and the second thing is, how do they share in the opportunity, especially in perspective.
Yes.
It's not surprising the statistics you share, because if you look at the VC and the PE companies, the biggest ones are in America. The women on the boards of those companies are very few, maybe less than 10%. And decisions are made there at the board, the expenditure committee or the investment committee. And these are decisions that are made usually in a consensus basis. So, because of the spirit of similarity, you have a group of men making decisions about where to invest money, and their default is companies run by men, because they believe these companies are going to more likely succeed. There is the myth that female-led companies are more about NGOs, or not necessarily the thing that will return us the highest return on our interests, on our capital. That's the perception. But because there's not enough of the other parties sitting at the table to moderate those myths carry on. That's the part of the funding. So the people approving the funding are men, and their default is men. Then they give the money to men-led companies. On the other side, the way we bring up our girls that become women is also a bit constricted. The girls are supposed to be perfect. We go on all sorts of expedition. I told you that the entrepreneur is a visionary. We call him the hustler. The way we play when we're young, climbing trees, taking risks, and so on. Many girls go with us. I mean, there's nothing wrong with giving the girl appropriate clothing, trousers or short knicker, climb the trees with them, take those risks. But they are taught to be prim and proper, don't make any mistake. So they grow up avoiding mistakes. They don't want to be embarrassed, forgetting that mistakes is part of learning. If I want to learn a language, German or French, of course I'll make mistakes. People will laugh at me. But that's part of learning. If you don't make mistakes and people don't laugh at you, you will not learn the language. It's like riding a bike. You cannot learn how to ride a bike without falling once or twice. It's embarrassing. But without that, you will learn how to ride a bike. And I think we teach our girls about perfection right from the young age, that we don't fire their creative and innovative side of their mind. And therefore, and therefore, when we come to starting a business, an entrepreneurial business, you also find less of them there. They probably go more into mainstream because, again, of that acculturation of constitution. So we need to correct that from when the girl child is developing. Let her key into the creative and innovative spaces, which involves risk, which involves some mistakes, which involves some embarrassment, but you have to get comfortable with it in order that you grow with it. And again, on the funding side, we need to have more women sitting on the boards of these funding companies so that they will hear the story of the women from the women's perspective.
Thank you very much, sir, for your time with us today. We really, really appreciate this on behalf of myself and everybody at TechNet.
David, it will be my pleasure. I'm always the first fan of TechNet. Appreciate you and your team and commend you for the good job you're doing. I wish you more grease to your elbow.
Thank you very much, sir. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.